morning. Thank you for joining us for today's morning keynote session at CAR MBS 2020. This morning's keynote session is sponsored by the Alliance for Automotive Innovation. During the session, all audience members will be muted to ensure quality user experience for everyone participating. If you have any other questions regarding virtual MBS experience, please feel free to ask those questions at the information desk in the virtual lobby. Please also take a moment to visit the virtual exhibits in the exhibit hall. And if you'd like to earn CEU or PDH credits for participating in CAR MBS, please visit our MBS page on our website at www.cargroup.org to access the registration link for CEUs or PDHs. Once again, thank you for joining us today. I'm pleased to welcome session moderator, CAR President and CEO, Carla Balo.
Thank you very much, Katie. It gives me great pleasure again to be able to host our keynote sessions on today, the second day of MBS 2020. And our first keynote today is Larry Dominique, who's the President and Chief Executive Officer of PSA North America. Group PSA is the global automotive company which produces Peugeot, Citroën, DS, Opel, and Vauxhall automobiles, and the global mobility services brand Free2Move. In this role, he's responsible for developing the North American business from a greenfield, which includes mobility, financing, parts and service, aftermarket, connected services, as well as vehicle sales and distribution. That's quite a role. In April 2016, PSA announced the Global Push to Pass plan, of which re-entry into the North America market is a key element. Prior to joining Group PSA, Larry held a variety of roles both in and out of OEMs. He was an industry consultant working with many OEMs, private equity, and other groups. He was also president of ALG, the industry benchmark for residual values. ALG's clients included OEMs, finance companies, banks, fleet and leasing companies, as well as a number of ratings agencies and desk software providers. He was also the EVP of OEM data analytics for TrueCar Incorporated, which is a leading online marketplace. Prior to that time, he was the vice president of product planning at Nissan North America. And I'm proud to say he's also an engineering geek, and he has an electrical engineering background and spent some time also at General Motors. So without further ado, I will turn the presentation screen over to Larry. Welcome.
Great. Well, hi, thank you, Carla. It's great to be here. I'm going to go ahead and try to share my screen. Here we go. Okay, I hope everybody can see that okay. So good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be presenting here at the, I would say, not so new normal car management briefings. I hope you and your families are well and managing through. I truly wish, excuse me, there you go. Yeah. I truly wish we could all be together in Traverse City sharing not only what's being presented during these sessions, but networking and catching up on a variety of topics. It's my sincere hope we'll all be together next year. I've always appreciated the diversity of topics, perspectives, and insight presented at CAR from many of you in this complex and diverse industry. I hope I can add to that history. Given the fact I'm speaking to you virtually today, it's clear our industry and our society as a whole is in a fluid and rather uncharted river. We have all been inundated over the past 4 months with a wide array of opinions, predictions, warnings, opportunities, and theories. It seems everyone believes they know how consumers will respond to this crisis, what OEMs, suppliers, and dealers must do to compete going forward, and where we need to pivot. The U.S. auto industry has responded with amazing speed at the dealer, supplier, and OEM level. But that is in response to today more than tomorrow. It is not my intent to paint another post-COVID scenario or to promote a specific remedy to the challenges we face today. Rather, while preparing my remarks, I asked myself a few questions. What do I have to offer that when you guys disconnect from this meeting can cause you to look maybe a little further out of the box than we've had to over the last several years? With that in mind, I will try my hardest not to be overtly promotional and suggest PSA has all the answers that fits everyone else's challenges going forward. My goal is to provide a few takeaways that are meaningful, practical, and relevant, all through a very unique lens that has been focused over the past 3 years on the very issues we're all taking much more seriously today. Specifically, I want to touch on 3 key messages. I want to talk about the mobility evolution in North America. I would like to talk about a digital acceleration as it relates to our industry. And finally, my thoughts on what our industry must do to improve both customer satisfaction and profitability. What you will not hear from me is anything related to the pending merger with PSA Group and FCA, other than to say the plans are on track for Q1 2021 closing. And yes, we have a new name coming, Stellantis. You may have your own opinions of the name, but it's clearly unique and represents a modern, less legacy-minded than individual existing names. I mean, after all, compared to PSA, FCA, or FCA, PSA, Stellantis actually sounds pretty good to me. So let's talk a little bit about mobility. You know, mobility is a word that has been heard everywhere now for several years. With all due respect to my consultancy friends in the audience, I have read a lot of studies that have forecasted a very rapid increasing mobility ecosystem in North America, large-scale deployment of both physical and mobility as a service elements. Some studies predicted the US mobility market would be literally in the billions of dollars by 2020. Unfortunately, consumers, regulators, municipalities didn't read clearly the same studies and did not accelerate mobility activities. Over the past 8 years, we have seen many different mobility activities begin, expand, invest more, lose millions of dollars, and disappear. Many of these innovative services, such as bike sharing and scooter sharing, flew onto the scene, unregulated, packing a bit of a Wild West attitude with little consideration of the impact to the cities, liabilities, or even collaboration. We kind of went from like, wow, this is amazing, to why are there piles of scooters stacked up in my city? We OEMs also took our turn. We introduced subscription service, car sharing, van sharing, aggregation applications. But unlike our scooter sharing friends, we tended to do this in a big way with big dollars. Literally hundreds of millions of dollars have been spent standing up businesses, yet very few remain in operation today. As an industry, we have taken a bit of a shotgun approach, trying many things in hopes something stuck. In discussion with many OEM executives, it doesn't seem the intent was really to address the mobility needs of consumers and cities. It was more to protect vehicle production and sales. You know, we originally thought traditional fleet rather than innovative mobility. There seems to be a thought process. If mobility increases and fewer private cars are sold, perhaps we need to ensure that mobility services can be sourced by our own companies. I don't think this is the right approach to how we should think about mobility as a service. Even at PSA North America, we launched our own Free to Move application digitally 18 months later just to shut it down. We launched our Free to Move car sharing in Washington, D.C., and I'm happy to say we are very close to it being a sustainable business. However, it's only after 24 months of focused single city attention to cost, depreciation, and how best to satisfy car sharing consumers. We purposely have not expanded beyond DC so we can prove viability. Once achieved, we can scale our learning carefully to other cities. So if we all did a lot of things wrong, what should we have done, or what did we need to do differently? I am convinced that for mobility to succeed, it needs to be within a highly collaborative environment. This means understanding first that mobility is not a one-size-fits-all. We are a huge country with varying needs and attitudes in different parts of the country. By collaboration, we need cities and states to work closely with mobility service providers to pave the way for success. This could be free EV charging infrastructure, free parking, dedicated lanes, utilization of public funding potentially to source mobility services in place of traditional mass transit, and consumer outreach. Today, very few cities are thinking this way. In Washington, D.C., we meet regularly with the DC DDOT to discuss how best to serve the citizens of D.C. with our car sharing, discussing how successful car sharing can reduce overall number of cars in the street, congestion, simplify parking, and bring mobility to the citizens in a critical step to success. We have had outreach from many cities recently who are beginning to study how best to meet consumer needs for mobility services in a post-COVID environment where close proximity mass transit is more challenged. Less dense, alternative modes of transportation will be required. However, this legwork doesn't need to be done by every OEM or each startup, city by city. We need to leverage our industry advocacy groups, universities, and even mobility user groups to help us define and simplify the regulations, contracts, insurance needs, and even subvention opportunities. In Washington, D.C., we found during the crisis consumer concerns regarding mass transit density risks and the need for more cleaning of our vehicles motivated them to increase private car sharing use versus shared. We worked with the city to focus on ways to help the public through reduced parking costs, less needs to move our vehicles after hours, focusing with our logistics team on deep cleaning, and an increased focus on communications to our consumers has fortunately rapidly increased the business. It seems that the COVID pandemic has added additional challenges to mobility as a service in many areas. Now is the time to reach out, question the mobility norm, and through collaboration with city and state governments, find the mobility solutions which will first and foremost provide mobility to those who really need it and accelerate the trend and produce a viable business. Although our consultant friends may have been overly optimistic regarding the speed of mobility adoption, they were absolutely correct in the fact that the needs and the opportunities that mobility can deliver exist. It will take an energetic and collaborative industry along with government to make sure the road to mobility, if paved with supportive elements, will ensure adoption and sustainability. So now I'd like to take a moment to pivot to a truly buzzworthy topic, digital. The word is everywhere. I read articles every day pontificating about how consumers are shifting to buying things digitally, ordering food digitally, and even having doctor's appointments. So with this sudden pandemic-based shift, we are now talking about how automotive retail must accelerate with digital tools. I hate to say it, folks, but the trend started a long time ago. Beyond a handful of innovative automotive startups over the past 10 years, traditional automotive has pretty much ignored this overall reality. While companies like Google and Amazon fine-tune data science and artificial intelligence, we get excited about adding DocuPad to our dealer F&I processes. Now we read every day how the industry is going to move retail to a digital environment. Like it's as simple as subscribing to the most up-to-date software add-on and away we go. It's not so simple. While customer expectations are changing due to the digital shift, the automotive retail network, due to its immense size, is struggling to keep up. COVID's near retail shutdown of commerce magnified this challenge. I have to remind myself that North America automotive retail and service industry includes 18 different OEMs, 42 distinct brands, and in North America, over 35,000 franchised retailers. And between new and used, over $1 trillion of sales annually. That's a lot of noise and competition for consumers. Putting it in perspective, in 2018, there were only 16 countries in the world with a GDP over $1 trillion. As an industry, we do that selling cars, trucks, SUVs, and services in the US alone. We accomplish this using the basic construct of a 100-year-old retail model with emphasis on brick and mortar operations, high fixed costs, and growing intra-brand competition. This has driven front-end margins on automotive new car retail to a negative $600 a car, according to NADA's 2019 dealer survey. This translates to an average dealer gross profit of basically zero and net dealer profit of only 2.3%, primarily bolstered by OEM programs. Ironically, the shift to digital, starting with the internet, has accelerated this negative margin. When I was at TrueCar, as Carla mentioned, I ran ALG and all the data and analytics at TrueCar. We studied data on retail sales constantly. Key findings emerged, which now are exacerbated in this accelerated digital economy. Over a 20-year period from 1995 to 2015, there was a price dispersion compression of 50%, meaning the variation between the highest price paid for a car and the lowest price paid shrank by 50%. This was driven by the growth of the internet and price paid transparency. In other words, we now had informed consumers. The average distance between a retail dealer and the purchaser has grown every year. We used to have very well-defined RMAs and DMAs. That doesn't exist so much anymore. Again, driven by the internet growth and the ability for consumers to shop at greater distances to save money. Interbrand competition has intensified. With full digital shopping transparency, it's common for consumers to choose what they want to purchase and then leveraging the digital communication tools pit dealers against each other until the retail margin is a huge negative number. The dealer typically accepts this due to other variable remuneration elements from OEMs tied to turnover. We recently studied a brand in our home state of Georgia. This brand has 10 franchise stores in Georgia, 5 in the Atlanta area and 5 dispersed throughout the state. The average number of sales for the Atlanta stores was over 1,000 per year, while the outlying stores just over 350 per year. However, the average transaction price of the Atlanta dealers was over $2,000 less than the outlying stores, all attributed to interbrand competition. Interbrand competition has driven the margins per vehicle in the Atlanta area to be negative, but dealers continue to benefit from OEM programs. When I ran ALG, I interacted with every OEM, and I heard from every single one of the senior sales executives that intra-brand competition is the #1 challenge to dealer profitability. Unless something changes and changes dramatically, dealer profitability will continue to decrease, which will cause many retailers to potentially exit at some point, or OEMs will need to support the ecosystem greater. I don't believe the latter is feasible in today's or tomorrow's business reality. OEMs' total distribution costs are now over 35% of invoice, and in the future, highly regulated environment, not a sustainable cost structure. So is our retail model a house of cards just waiting for a stiff wind to blow it over? Not quite yet, but if we do not shift and shift quickly, it may. If moving to digital tools and processes is the answer, boy, that doesn't sound so difficult, but you cannot forget how we're applying these tools. Let's take Carvana, for example. Ernie Garcia and the team at Carvana decided about 7 years ago not to try to be a CarMax with better tools. Why not? The answer is pretty simple. It's not only difficult, but nearly impossible to eliminate the brick and mortar high fixed costs associated with a blended physical digital automotive retail. Carvana chose to build a digital-only consumer-facing model focusing on the customer experience first and building the required back office physical elements as necessary. This was tough and required multiple iterations of a minimum viable digital product, refined over time and scaling until they now receive net promoter scores in the mid-80s to 90s. Unprecedented in automotive. Okay, so you might say that Carvana is used cars, Larry, and you're right. But the decision they made to forego physical and focus on digital with no legacy was the right strategy. For our industry, 35,000 franchise retailers, this isn't so clear. Each dealer lives every month with a brick and mortar facility, high fixed costs, which require creative and energetic fixed operations business, and F&I performance to cover the costs and generate a profit. The average negative $600 per new car sold margin is just part of the turnover reality that makes the engines run. Add to that pressure the fact that to this day, we're still building huge, expensive dealerships that cost tens of millions of dollars, exacerbating the very fixed cost absorption model existing today. At a time when our research tells us that consumers are looking for a simpler, more efficient process, our retail structure defaults to spending money on fountains and Taj Mahals. A good example of a disconnect or a lack of reality, if you ask me. The unfortunate side effect of our model are the challenges to customer satisfaction and customer experience. Our industry consistently ranks near the bottom of every survey or poll associated with trust and satisfaction. Don't get me wrong, there are many retailers out there who deliver amazing customer experiences and generate solid profits. However, our industry suffers from a stigma we absolutely must change. We must change because the consumers have already changed. The Amazons, Chick-fil-A's, Starbucks, Shave Clubs, and even Walmart have influenced and changed consumer expectations, which we must now meet. At this point in my delivery, many of you are probably thinking about calling Roadster, AutoFi, Moto Insight, Cox, or other digital tool providers, and these companies all offer exceptional products. Unfortunately, today the application of digital tools for many is an additive cost to a business rolling in excess fixed costs. To add incremental digital tools without changing our core cost structure is potentially going to erode profit further. I have spoken to many dealers who tell me they are spending $500 to $700 per new car sold for their full digital toolkit. That equates to 2% of the average transaction price in the United States today. It is, in my humble opinion, we need to explore and accelerate a shift to the digital processes while reducing fixed costs. This must be done at the retail as well as OEM level. We OEMs are systematically prone to living in today because we have lived on the 30-day cycle for 100 years. Executives are programmed to hit retail and wholesale monthly targets, many times irrespective of the impact to the future. Focus is upon making the plan, which we are really good at achieving. It is now upon the OEMs as well as retailers to find common ways to shift to the digital economy. The industry must reduce the overall physical footprint and focus on delivering a digital customized experience. At the same time, OEMs and retailers must break down barriers to collaboration. Consumers are going to expect an experience equal to what other industries are delivering today in the digital economy. If OEMs and retailers don't find common elements to improve, consumers will quickly shift to those brands which do. This can begin in a few areas where collaboration and data sharing can enhance and accelerate a greater digital customer experience. So, who owns the consumer relationship and data management? A statement and a word that historically can clear a room at any meeting between an OEM and a retail group. But who owns the customer data? Well, that's easily answered as soon as everyone agrees on who owns the customer. Is ownership different based on whether the customer comes in through the OEM website, off the street, from a third party? What has driven us to an ecosystem of control devoid of collaboration because of the belief the customer data is the key to sales, but clearly not customer satisfaction or profitability? The complexity of data accumulation today is a main driver in the stops and starts of the customer journey. Would the customer experience in automotive retail be smoother, clearer, or more efficient if that data was available to everyone throughout the sales process? Would brand marketing be more effective if a consistent message and personality were presented to the consumer from the very beginning to the very end of their journey? Or does it make more sense to invest billions of dollars in brand marketing at the manufacturer's level and then transition to a regional advertising campaign And then finally, to intra-brand local competitive advertising. Would sharing consumer data in a non-intra-brand environment enlighten all parties and allow them to provide clearer, more efficient paths to a sale? I believe the answer is quite clear. These are important examples of where automotive retail can innovate. Seamlessness breeds efficiency, but some of our systems and structures stand in the way. Another example, for those of us who have worked throughout the supply chain, just ordering the right color and trim level for the right region, for instance. Your decisions can be more accurate if consumer data is shared and available unilaterally throughout the system. Some of the most successful companies and partnerships in the past decade throughout the world have placed data and data science at the forefront of their business operations. To free the data in a thoughtful and open way develops transparency. The answer is a shared relationship and shared responsibility between the manufacturer and the retailer. We must change our mindset from my data or your data to our data. It's the only way manufacturers and retailers can work together to build a seamless customer experience. It will provide more efficient operations and heightened profitability, and most importantly, a happier, more loyal customer. As I pointed out, consumers want a customized experience. Some people want a test drive. Most people have to deal with the trade-in and financing, and all customers will need to deal with service. While those challenges are more analog in nature, innovative solutions are just as important in these digital aspects of our business. This thinking is not evolutionary, but truly revolutionary. And to many in our industry, they cannot envision this monumental shift. This is unfortunate because data science and AI will be the future success differentiators. Those who embrace it and apply it with vigor will be the successful companies, with all need to push past the legacy thinking, systems, and accelerate towards the future. We at PSA North America benefit from a lack of legacy. Today, we don't have a retail network, service facilities, or predefined behavior. It is our intention to focus first on delivering class-leading customer satisfaction by an emphasis on a customized digital experience. I have been quite public with regards to the fact we are not trying to replicate Tesla and ignore the franchise realities of North America. However, you can expect a very, very different approach to retail network, digital platform, processes, and data accumulation, sharing, and action. The future success for OEMs is reduction of distribution costs while ensuring both retail and OEM margin sustainability. This has to be done through strong pricing power, not volume turnover. The high turnover model of today is not sustainable and will cause business failures if not addressed. As a new brand coming to this highly competitive marketplace, the key to success will be defined by the agility, innovation, lean operations, and most importantly, satisfying consumers. I appreciate you participating in this seminar and allowing me to share my thoughts with regards to mobility as a service and solving at least part of the industry's margin compression challenge. This most recent challenge has peeled away some veneer of our industry and laid bare dysfunctional and long ignored challenges. As executives of OEMs, suppliers, retails, or analysts, we have an opportunity to embrace these challenges and fight for creative and impactful solutions. Technology companies use terminologies such as minimum viable product, agile development, and iteration. The historic 5-year build and change cycles have no meaning in a digital consumer world. We need to change constantly, adapting to consumer changes and deploy with speed and quality to the likes never before seen in our industry. I wish you all well and thank you for your time today and look forward to answering some questions.
Thank you so much, Larry. You're basically turning the entire industry upside down. You know, fundamentally, all the things that we always say OEMs are good at, designing, building, and selling cars. I mean, every aspect of that, you're basically saying we need to rethink and challenge ourselves. So I thought it was quite interesting when you showed the slides of the dealers and the fixed costs of the dealers, and also that kind of intra-brand competition of, when you look at certain city areas and how much competition there is. So my question is, what are those fixed costs beyond just the building that, retailers should really focus on reducing? And are we going to see more mega dealers and more mergers and acquisitions to stop this kind of intra-competition? Or will it be a digital solution and we'll just get rid of a number of those stores?
It's a great question, Carla. So we have spent over the last several years a lot of time meeting with different dealer groups, small, medium, large, individual retailers. And when we talk about their fixed cost model, the first thing you had to do is kind of get a mirror and look in your own face as an OEM, because we have driven a lot of that cost behavior. We're the ones setting new visual standards. We're the one asking them to grow the size of their dealerships, put new signage up, use this special tile that only comes from one quarry in Italy. Those are the kind of behaviors we've had as OEMs that the dealers say, you have driven a lot of the cost into my business. So we've added larger footprints. We've added more dealers. When was the last time that an OEM had an open point that they didn't immediately fill? Looking at that intra-brand competition side. I've talked to a lot of dealer groups lately that have told me, I don't want to invest more in real estate. I don't want to invest more in large parking lots. I mean, you go up to San Jose and you talk to dealer groups and they're spending $1 million an acre for empty land. If you go to Des Moines, Iowa, it's a different cost structure. But fundamentally, we've now got these huge auto malls, or a mile at a time of dealership after dealership, and it all exists. And the dealers have this brick and mortar. And I was talking to one dealer group not too long ago that one of the major Japanese brands asked them to build a new store. They agreed, but the OEM paid 60% of the cost of that new store. And the president of the dealer group told me, he goes, I'm never going to see a return on that money. Not anymore, because the customers are expecting something different. So the dealers are unfortunately in a bit of a trick box. How do I reduce that physical footprint and those physical costs, the number of employees, the brick and mortar, the parking lots, the parking and so forth in a digital world? And it's going to take some really hard decisions. This one dealer group I talked to has 12 brands and a large number of physical facilities. And they're actually developing a 20-year plan to reduce their physical footprint by 50%. Because they want to focus on digital. So, and we as OEMs have to help that manifest itself. How can we help our retailers reduce that cost structure? Because today, that inherent behavior, when I showed the NADA gross profit of about 0, and I showed a net profit of 2.3, I'm not an accountant, but typically net profit's lower than gross profit. But in the automotive industry, it's higher. And it's higher because of the remuneration programs that exist. And my fear is if those ever dry up from the OEMs, we're going to have a lot of retailers that are going to be significantly challenged. So we have to work with them to find a solution.
So thinking about that, and right now they have these huge lots full of vehicles. You go to the dealer, typically they don't have exactly what you're looking for. You end up settling for probably something more than what you were planning to spend. That's kind of the normal way that things happen. If indeed the full model changeover cycle goes away, in the future, would we be looking at actually, I want this particular product with these specific features, and you don't even have to go to the dealer. It just shows up straight from the manufacturer. And then what's the dealer going to do? And what should they be thinking about in that world?
Well, there's one thing you said in there that I think needs to be clear. You said directly from the manufacturer. In our country, that's not going to happen unless you're a new brand like a Tesla who's deciding to sell direct.
Right.
In a franchise environment, the vehicle can still show up at your customer's home, but it's going to show up from the dealer. But it goes back to my point about data. So there's a very large dealer group I've been working with under NDA. And I was sitting down having lunch with him once, and he said, Larry, he said, if you could actually share just consumer configuration data on your side of the website with my ordering people, He said, I could reduce my inventory by 30%. He said, because today we sell what we have,
Right.
not necessarily what consumers want.
Yeah.
The more we can refine our supply chain and understand what consumers expect, what the trends are, what the seasonality is, we can save millions of dollars on inventory control.
Yeah.
And he said, even in the service side, I could stock better inventory on my parts if I knew what was failing, if I knew what the trends were. So this is the kind of data collaboration I was talking about, Carla.
And do you think the recent trend of the automakers to actually get rid of some of their models and different specs or different additions is starting this kind of trend so that they can be more better with their supply chain, manufacturing efficiency, and dealer efficiency?
It has to. It's 20 years late. You know, you knew me when I was running product planning, and we did studies when I was at Nissan that the average customer had less than a 4% chance of finding a Nissan Altima that they configured in inventory at their local dealerships.
Right.
And if you talk to most OEMs, they know that, you know, 10 or 20% of their models and mixes sells 80, 90% of their mix.
Mm-hmm.
So, but when I talk to OEM executives, the commercial side guys and gals, they're so fixated on their volume and on their market share objective. They worry, rightly so, that if I don't have that one unique model, I'm going to lose that sale.
Mm-hmm.
So you really have to shift the way people think about their plan and their turnover. And it's going to take a while to transition to that kind of mindset.
Mm-hmm.
The consumers are ready for it. You know, brands like Tesla have shown you don't need a lot of variability to sell, you know, what you make. So I think we need to start thinking that way.
I think I have to bring up Tesla, you know, just because everybody does. But when we look at their showroom model, which is basically just here's our car and then you order it and get it delivered, is that the right thinking? Is that, you know, is it setting a new standard for how we'll see things happen in the future?
You know, it's a great question. Now, they have the fortunate opportunity to live in a non-inventory based reality.
Right.
Whereas 90% of our customers and from most OEMs, the cars are coming out of dealer inventory, and customers are expecting that, right? I want a delivery within a few hours.
Right.
And I don't think that's going to change. But what I did do, as we've been developing our Peugeot digital experience, our head of digital asked each person on my team to go to different brands and configure a car to order. How long does it take? Literally, you can go to the Tesla website and you can click on 6 or 7 pages and boom, you're ready to buy a car.
Mm-hmm.
You go to most other brands, you're 15, 20 pages in, or in some brands, I have to choose my dealer first before they even let me configure a car.
Right.
So we as OEMs give customers through the digital process reasons to reject it. We need to simplify it and bring the customers to believe they're in control, because they are. At the end of the day, they're deciding where to take their money and to buy the car. So I do think Tesla is a good benchmark. On the used car side, Carvana is certainly a good benchmark.
Yeah.
You know, and if you think about it, they're now selling about 20,000 cars a month digitally, purely digitally. And Vroom is rapidly catching up to that number. So, you know, the customers are ready. You know, we have to find a way, even within our high density network environment, to find a way to deliver that experience.
Do you think the pandemic will create, you know, this long lasting digital way, and are dealers fundamentally changed? Or is there a chance they're going to revert back if we have a vaccine within the next few months?
I think it's blended. You know, I have a place in Santa Barbara County where I go to, and it has very local dealerships, right? It's got a single Ford dealership, a single Chevy dealership. You drive around and 90% of the license plate surrounds have that Chevy brand or that Ford brand on it. And if you talk to them, I've gone in and talked, they don't care about the digital tools, not to the most part. They have a very defined geography. Customers are very happy coming to the local store. But when I showed that slide that showed those high density Atlanta area and the LA area for dealerships and those big DMAs and metros, I think the digital's got to latch on, and customers are going to expect it. And I think the retailers are going to have to embrace it.
So I have to change a little bit and ask about PSA and their entry into the North American market? I know it's been talked about. Is there, some bumps in the road now because of what's happening economically and in society, or are your plans on track?
Our plans are on track. Actually, I think in some ways we've talked about the digital experience that we want to deploy. And I think some of the stuff that's come out of COVID has actually accelerated acceptance of that. So if I had an audience of people who were willing to consider shopping online, looking at a new brand online, I think that universe has expanded. Mm-hmm. But I also think it's added another layer of challenge because all my competitors are going to have to pivot digitally, which means they're going to be focusing on digital, which means we have to step up our game and deliver an even stronger customer experience when we launch Peugeot in North America. But from a standpoint of getting the vehicles ready, getting our digital experience ready, we've continued to just be on track. Mm-hmm. We've said we're targeting around the 2023 timeframe for that. Mm-hmm. So we're working more virtually. A lot of phone calls at 4 o'clock and 5 o'clock in the morning with our friends in France. Mm-hmm. But we're moving along quite well right now.
Let me talk a little bit about mobility services. Mm-hmm. I really liked the slide that you put up that showed 2 slides. One that showed the prediction by Frost and Sullivan about really how deep we were going to have mobility mm-hmm. services and how much value there was going to be in 2020 and how that's just not happened. And the second one showing all of the different automotives and the different initiatives that they have done, and most of them are gone. When we look at all those different mobility sectors, ride sharing, car sharing, micro mobility, what are those that really have the legs that are going to grow the fastest and maybe have the longest lasting effects for society and for mobility in general?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it's a multi-billion-dollar question from a standpoint of opportunity. So we certainly think, based on our experience in DC, Carla, that there is definitely an opportunity for car sharing. In Washington, DC, 60% of our customers don't own cars. So would that work in a suburban area, rural area? Probably not. But does it work in the cities with the higher density and people who are willing to give up car ownership? I think there's a trend in that. So making sure you have the right vehicles, the right cost structure, and everything to support their needs, because we have to compare our costs to Uber, we have to compare our costs to taxis, we have to compare our costs to rental cars and make sure that our cost structure, and that's the biggest challenge, is getting the cost structure right. The micro mobility, I believe there's an opportunity, but I think it has to reset. It has to take a step back. It has to work more collaboratively with cities, regulators, to understand how do you manage thousands of scooters in a metro area? Mm-hmm. How do you keep it viable? How do you keep it clean? How do you not make it a junk pile? We are starting to see more need on, we think subscription is also a viable. And there's a lot of controversy around mobility, around subscription, because mm-hmm. some dealers are doing it quite successfully. OEMs have tried and failed. Mm-hmm. Now regulators are involved, and is it a lease? Is it not a lease? How do you regulate it from an OEM dealer relationship? So we've got to get through that. But there's definitely the opportunity. Mm-hmm. But I think it's got to be city by city. There's no rush to market approach to this. You can't just rush to LA, rush to New York and start doing something. You need to think about what you're going to do. You need to work with the city, because you need to convince them it's in their best interest to help you help their citizens with mobility solutions that collaboratively work together. Mm-hmm. If they have expensive parking or high fees or something that preclude you from being viable, then you're not helping them or their customers. So I think working with the cities is going to be the next big step for all of us.
I think that's so smart, and staying in one vicinity that you understand what their mobility problems are, working with them, doing things jointly, showing the win-win on both sides, and then the win that it achieves for the citizens, because they're public servants. Yep. They have to show at the end of the day that this has had an impact on the quality of life for the people who live there. Correct. And, expanding too quickly, when you have different communities with different personalities that you don't understand with the same cookie cutter service, isn't going to work. And I think that's really quite clever. Now, Free to Move was spun off by PSA. It seems like the umbilical cord is still connected because it's just one city with success. Why was that done? And, you know, what does the future look like?
Yeah, so Free to Move, because Free to Move is a global footprint, Carla, you know, we have car sharing in 3 different cities in Europe: Madrid, Lisbon, Paris. We have the same kind of Free to Move car sharing we have in North America, although it's focused on EVs over there versus ICEs. But Free to Move also has Free to Move Rent, Free to Move Lease, Free to Move Aggregation, you know, kind of aggregation app. So Bridget Courteau is the head of Free to Move on a global basis. And what she wanted to do was position Free to Move more as a technology company, and the ability to be very quick and agile and adapt very quickly to what she needs to accomplish. It also allows her to work with outside potential investment firms and things like that to bring in capital to accelerate mobility, and without having to be mired deeply in the processes of the parent company, named the group PSA. So she's looking for agility. I think it's great because, you know, we have acquired a couple small technology companies that are now under Free to Move now. And now we have the technology capability to move pretty quickly. As a matter of fact, we just launched a new, what we call our unicorn app in Washington, DC. It's actually migrating over this month, and it's bringing a much stronger suite of services and capabilities in our app for our Washington, DC customers.
Okay. What you say you have a lot of data from customers, and especially, you know, PSA and Free to Move. Is there any surprises that you've heard from the customers who've done the Free to Move service? Any lessons learned? Things you wish you might have done a little bit differently, or maybe pivoted quickly?
Yeah, I think one of the things we didn't do early was find the right way to communicate to the marketplace as to the benefits and the opportunities that car sharing brings to you. You tended to approach the market saying, we'll give you some promotional minutes, free minutes, if you come try our service. What we should have done is gone to the different areas and focused on, you know, we can provide you, you know, minute, hour, day, week, month-long rentals, you know, depending on what you want. So depending on your lifestyle, we see a spike every Friday afternoon of 3-day rentals, right? People heading out of DC, going into Maryland, Virginia, wherever it might be. And they tend to want to take the SUVs on those versus the sedans. So we're learning through the data, you know, maybe we should have shifted our mix of cars. On Friday afternoons, we should always make sure the SUVs are near Alexandria so people can pick up those cars. We learn a lot about the usage of the app and what customers like and don't like. We have telematics on the vehicle, so we know how many times the cars are starting and stopping, how far they're driven, the fuel economy. So we're collecting all that data. So it's helping us design cars. It's helping us refine our customer experience to make the app easier to use and make the vehicles more customer friendly. A good example is we didn't have, you can unlock the car with the app, you can start the car with the app, but when we launched, we didn't have Bluetooth. And we found people would park underground and there was no cell signal. So they couldn't get back in the car. So you learn these things over time. So the data is very rich. And what we're trying to do now is figure out, with the launch of Peugeot, how can we marry the Peugeot brand and car ownership with Free to Move services? How can those work in tandem? So, you know, maybe you buy a Peugeot SUV, but you fly to DC for the weekend and you want to have access to car sharing. Can we do that through one family of connections?
Make it a whole suite.
Yep.
Very smart. Now I'm going to end with one final question for you. Recently, all of the quarterly financial figures were introduced, and PSA was one of the few companies that said they came out with a profitable net result from the quarter. And we've both worked for Carlos Tavares, and we know that he's a genius when it comes to, you know, really finding ways to reduce some of the costs that are bleeding the company. What do you attribute, you know, having this profitable outcome, despite, you know, the sales figures not being as robust as anyone anticipated?
Yeah, it's interesting, as you know, you and I have both known him for a long time. And when he took over Group PSA at the end of 2013, the group had a minus 2.8% return on sales. In 2019, we had a positive 8.5% return on sales. And in the first half of 2020, we had a positive 3.7, even with sales down 34%.
Mm-hmm.
During the 5 years that he's been running the company, he had constant approach to, we need to position ourselves in a hyper competitive world from an automotive point of view. And if you don't have your costs under control and control your cash flow, you're not going to be able to weather the challenges we know are going to come to us.
Mm-hmm.
And in the end of 2019, in February of 2020, he announced the full year results from 2019. And what he explained to us is, he said, all the hard work that the PSA team has done over the last 5 years has gotten the company to a position where we are cash flow positive at half of our sales volume.
Mm-hmm.
Half.
It's amazing.
And in my 36 years, that's unprecedented.
Yeah.
From that standpoint.
I've never heard that.
So now when he talked about the first half, he said, we've hit our first true black swan event since he's been running the company.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, all the hard work you all did years ago is now allowing us to not be dependent upon other companies or governments, allows us to maintain our free cash flow positive, and to allow us to continue to invest and keep our employees moving forward. So it's about right sizing. It's about being agile, but he'll also tell you, Carla, there's still more opportunity. There's still a way to get more efficient.
Never satisfied.
Right. We can drive that cost greater. And he's right, because just looking at the CO2 requirements in Europe,
sure,
we are the only manufacturer in Europe who, from day one in January of 2020, is meeting all the CO2 mandates on a portfolio basis. And that
Mm-hmm.
leadership is allowing us to have a little bit of a safety margin going forward.
Sure.
And it's that kind of forward thinking. So now as a company, we start talking about CO2 neutrality as as a global company.
Mm-hmm.
We start thinking about sustainability in the future. And we might as well start planning for it now, because it's going to happen.
Yeah, without a doubt. Well, Larry, this has been just a fabulous presentation. I really enjoyed the way you've challenged the status quo of the industry and really talked about a lot of things that are working and giving people a lot of great ideas as they go forward and live through the pandemic and maybe more pandemics and what the future portends. So thank you so much
Thank you
for spending time with us from California, and have a great afternoon.
Great. Thanks, Carla. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
It's great to see you.
Bye now.
Bye.